Welcome back to our three-part series on cannabis and seniors. In this second installment, we dive straight into what it would mean if cannabis becomes a Schedule III drug, following the recent recommendation from the Department of Health and Human Services. What implications would that have for both physicians and you? We'll also explore how to find reliable resources to answer your questions about medical cannabis and discuss the best ways to bring up cannabis with seniors in the exam room. So without further ado, let's jump into part 2 of our three-part discussion on medical cannabis.
Now that medical marijuana, I think cannabis is what you prefer, is being moved to Schedule III, do you see that having any significant impact on either access or as Dr. Luffam said, possibly purity? And the greater pharmacist role?
I would just point out, and I'm going to let Paul go right now, but even though we are talking about Schedule III, it is not yet a done deal, and it's been a lot of work to get here. I have my personal preference on which schedule it should be, which is not 3, but this does feel like progress, and it is inherently an acknowledgement by the FDA and the DEA specifically that there is a medical application of cannabis, botanical cannabis, and I'll popcorn Paul.
So the issue for you as a physician is that you will legally be able to prescribe it if you can find a source. So you'll need to work with a pharmacist probably to do that, and it even may need to be compounded to get the dose or type that you wish for. But under DEA regulation, here's the problem now. As you know, as a physician, you cannot prescribe it, you can only recommend it. That's the first issue. That will change. The second piece of that will be that it would be a prescription item under Schedule III, probably. There is one exception which may allow it not to require a prescription, but in general, it's my belief that it probably will, given the history of the drug and its concern for some people that it is a major hazard. We all know from a toxicity point of view that it is very low on the scale, lower than alcohol, lower than opiates, lower than benzos. So from that standpoint, it's a safer drug, and that's why the FDA is challenging the DEA over their scheduling of it.
Yeah, I'd like to see it Schedule VI personally. Once Big Pharma gets involved, my fear is that it becomes inaccessible from a cost perspective. As you are well aware, that the prescription cannabis that's available today is exceedingly expensive in narrow therapeutic indications as well. So, and personally, I would prefer to see this, dispensed and recommended from pharmacies across the country. I think that's really where the benefit of having it rescheduled or recertified in any way, shape, or form, even if it's compounded, makes most sense for access and for expertise.
How receptive are pharmacists that are not the independent pharmacist? How receptive have you found them to be?
50-50, truthfully.
Really?
Yeah,
I'd give it more percent than that.
Maybe, but I mean, I had Cody, you know about my issue with my last presentation and having pharmacists get. So I had a presentation just giving a brief overview of the medical cannabis history and not dosing or anything, but just general overview so that pharmacists would know. And before I even presented, just hearing about my title, we had about 7 pharmacists screaming and yelling about me even presenting on the topic before even hearing it. And then afterwards, luckily, we still went ahead and still presented, and there was no issues afterwards. But during my presentation, there was one pharmacist that kept saying, the FDA hasn't approved this schedule, we'll never approve it Schedule III. They're not going to, it's like, and it's as if the pharmacists don't know it's actually in process of being considered for Schedule III, so it's really just, I think a lot of people, because it's Schedule I, have kind of, medically put a blind eye to it just because they wanted to protect their own license. And I can tell you in the state of California, it's not something the pharmacist license is not protected currently for dispensing cannabis. Like if you're in a facility and you administer it to a patient, the nursing and the pharmacist are not protected in the state of California currently for Ryan's Law. And so they are not legally allowed to touch the medication or dispense to administer to a patient. So it's really important that so a lot of pharmacists are just nervous and they want to protect their license, which I completely understand. But I also feel that turning kind of a blind eye to this knowledge is not really helping us as a community, because it's quieting the education instead of broadening it.
Yeah, my understanding is that having it scheduled as a Schedule 1 has actually impeded, I think, clinical research, at least in this country. And so, as Dr. Peterson said, it took 90 years for us to actually get it at least understood from a pharmacologic perspective. And other countries haven't had that. I think a lot of the research out of Israel. From Tycoon and their whole body of work and the way that they actually dispense and prescribe it there has been very effective. It's something, a model that we could probably adopt. What are your thoughts on at least the worldwide adoption of cannabis? What do you guys know about that as far as are we lagging? Are we leading?
I want to focus on in the States real quick, is because you can't even we can focus on California, but every single cannabis market in the United States is different because we have no interstate commerce and we have none. So you got to get specific license and do all your stuff and seed to sale in every state. Some states are doing quite well. California, for example, has amazing access, right? There's cannabis relative to other states all over the place. But there's zero, and I mean zero, access to medical professionals trained in cannabis. And there's no involvement of a pharmacist, for example. If you look to Pennsylvania, if you look to New York, if you look to Connecticut, if you look to Virginia at one time, and Ohio almost did it, a pharmacist was on the license and a pharmacist is in the dispensary. And we continue to see this model kind of hashed out. Patty had asked what the patients or independent pharmacies were thinking. Well, in the state of Georgia, which has put what's called a low THC cap, it cannot be more than 5% THC in their liquid products. They are actually having independent pharmacies go ahead, take the ball and run with it, and they can be participants in the low THC medical marijuana program in Georgia. So this is a step forward, but we see pharmacists involved all over the world. A little bit in Canada, not so much, but definitely when you go to Spain, if you go to Portugal, if you go to Italy, Australia is a great example. Compounding pharmacists are involved. There are countless examples of more progressive situations, certainly more so than California, which, again, we opened up the floodgates to access and to the products, but we haven't really done the work to train the medical professionals and to train the at-risk populations, such as seniors.
That's an excellent question. Let me just ask Dr. Laughlin a quick question. So my mother-in-law, who is having trouble sleeping, if I was going to recommend a patient find an educational site to be trusted on the internet, if that's even exists, that could be the unicorn. Do you guys have some recommendations where patients should go to get reliable information if they can't find a cannabis expert locally?
We have a website ourselves, PCCCRX, and that would be a good starting place. Certainly all of us are willing to interact with patients and answer their questions and help them through this journey. So that's also a good possibility there. We see some...
Paul, excuse me, is that PCCCRX.org?
So we sense the problem as already discussed 4 or 5 years ago and felt that it was necessary to provide education. And in our interaction with legislators, that's one of the things that we're advocating for, so that everyone has an opportunity to get trained. Whether they have to have a certification or not, that's up in the air, although we're proposing a certification course for pharmacists, physicians, nurses, and whoever else wants to take it. So that will be the way that we think we can handle it. We're beginning to see cannabis information in the textbooks, and so that will be another thing that from a medical school point of view and a pharmacy school point of view, but we've got a ways to go yet. And for the record, relating to your international question, This same group will be lecturing to Toro University in Vallejo in 2 weeks. And one of the questions that will be asked is, what about the international treaties relative to cannabis? Because we, as the nation, has signed such a treaty, and it'll have to be reversed, or we'll have to back out of it to make it more accessible globally. And so that's another stumbling block. We can overcome it, we think, but that's what it'll take.
Jill, Dr. Simone could not join us tonight. She's part of your coalition, and I know that she teaches a class on cannabis pharmacology at the University of California, San Diego. Do you see more acceptance, well, you kind of alluded to it, in pharmacy schools and medical schools or nursing schools, teaching either some of the pharmacology, or are we making progress there?
Yes, we are, but the expert is Cody, because Cody is part of that program, both at UCI and UCSD. So, Cody, go for it.
That's true. UCSD has had a cannabis pharmacology program for their pharmacy students and their medical students for what I believe is 4 years now, and it's a 2-credit elective. That's great progress. That program, Jill, who started it down there, I lecture there and teach them about that endocannabinoid system we talked about. She's actually come up and we've co-chaired a class at UCI. We're working on pitching UCSF. We know for a fact that USC, another one of our members, she's leading a class that's focusing on it there. And there are countless other academic programs around the country, kind of setting pharmacy aside, countless that are leaning into this space. Dr. Johnson and I both graduated from the University of Maryland, Baltimore. Their School of Pharmacy there, they had a 2-year master program in cannabis science and therapeutics. So proud to say that things are changing, and I am happy to share that.
Brian, how do you see integrating all of this knowledge you all have into the doctors you have just on your staff here? Could you start with just the people on your staff?
Yeah, that's a great question, and this is my follow-up. I have 120 primary care physicians here on that we contract with, that manage as 32,000 seniors. Where do we start with them to get them to feel comfortable, either especially asking the question during a normal routine office visit? Are you using, so it doesn't sound so endocannabinoid, like it sounds sneaky. Mm-hmm. But I mean, would you guys be willing to, and do you already participate in outside of pharmacists, where I think that's where to me, I'd love to see the dispensing and really work with patients happen. What inroads do we need to make, and how would you recommend we go about teaching our physicians about how to interview, make recommendations, as Dr. Lefflam said, to patients who are interested in getting, I think, just a natural, I don't want to say naturopathic because it's really not. I think it's medicinal, therapeutic that's a little different from what they're used to using, that hasn't been working.
I'd recommend, like, one thing that we are setting up is a training course. So, and just a certification course for physicians to be a part of. There are other organizations that do it as well, but we are setting up one as well. So that's one option. How to speak to their patients, though. The biggest problem I've noticed, because I review charts on a daily basis for patients, and the word recreational and the word drug use, that is such a negative connotation. And so people will not provide that. Now, if they say, are you on any herbal supplements, including cannabis therapy? Oh, that's much more pleasant. Oh, yes, I'm on many, over the counters. Let me tell you about my supplements. Oh, I am taking this cannabis supplement. Oh, what does your cannabis supplement have in it? Does it have THC? Oh, yes, it does. Okay, what milligrams does it have? Just so that the provider can really figure out what the patient's on and how they're using it. Because the second you say recreational, you're going to lose them. The second you say like recreational drug usage or drug uses in general, you're going to lose your patients. I have plenty of patients, and I even say to them, you need to tell your doctor you're going to be starting a medical cannabis therapy. They need to be in the know because it does affect things. So they can't, if a doctor is not understanding this, and doesn't know they're on it, it can cause problems with other medications. If they see, oh, your blood sugar is doing great, obviously it's your insulin you're on. Well, if you're not using your insulin, you're using cannabis instead. And I'm not saying to do that, but it's important that the doctor knows what you're actually using so they can make a better judgment. So if they see cannabis as a supplement that the patient is taking for medicinal benefit, it has a much better connotation than if it's drug use or recreational drug.
Yeah, I think the language is very important because many seniors don't want to be considered druggies. And if you use the right language, I think you will have them from the beginning. And if I use the word medicinal cannabis, it's on my record at the DOHC when they tell you, they want to know what medications you're on. Every time I go to my doctor, my primary care physician, I bring with me my updated medicinal list, and I always have on it, I use medicinal cannabis to sleep. And it's there and it's permanent.
I love that. You're a good patient.
Yes. And medicinal cannabis is a great way to say it. It's not marijuana, because marijuana really has such a negative society connotation. So that's why medical cannabis. You're saying medical. You're saying the generic, like the plant name, and it's a little bit less aggressive sounding or negative.
We could find the right people like you to talk to us, excuse me, on a regular basis. We would have more education and we'd be better informed, and you wouldn't have the problems you're running into with cannabis seniors going into the emergency room because they took too much of something they didn't know what they were taking.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
And as you mentioned, they might not even be willing to share because that stigma persists, particularly when we're talking about, the 50 and up community today. They went through the propaganda and all of this stuff. We're coming out of that. The truth is it has some benefits. It has some side effects. It's not for everybody, just like any other medicine. And once again, doctors aren't super familiar with these medicines, but once you get a handle on what is the cannabis flower and how do patients consume it, you don't treat it that much differently than other medicine. You're titrating to effect to get the optimized benefit with the least amount of side effects, and it's really, I think, rather intuitive for physicians and pharmacists and nurses to take this and run with it once they feel confident in the endocannabinoid system, what the cannabinoids are, the drug delivery systems, and potential side effects. So I would say that's what the information you need to give providers, and they will naturally become more comfortable with this actually, not that scary substance.
Thanks for listening to our 3-part series on cannabis and seniors. We hope that this information has been invaluable to you in learning more about cannabis. While many of these points can apply to anyone, remember to discuss any questions regarding cannabis with your doctor or the experts featured in this podcast. In the final episode of this series, we will talk about the impact of recent changes on employers and the laws that affect your ability to be hired. We'll also touch on the subject of what to do if cannabis is overconsumed and how to address existing stigma. If you found this information valuable, don't forget to subscribe and give us a like for our future content. Until next time, take care, and we'll see you in part 3.